Good day, everyone. Today, we, the Room 3, are about to discuss to you a very sensitive, widely popular natural phenomenon, the effect of multiple destructive natural and human activities. This is climate change. Before that, I would like to introduce myself and my teammates. I am John Noel Padasas, and I go by the name Code 07 of Room 3. And here is the page where you can meet my teammates. That's it. So let's set the roof on fire, baby. Let's get started with our presentation. Climate change is surely a major environmental problem that we've been facing for a long period of time now. We can experience its wrath when the sun pierces right through our skin, or when the cold makes us want to wrap ourselves in multiple clothing. Localities as well as the countries all around the world have been making efforts and movements to address the phenomenon, for its effects could be highly fatal. Displayed right now in the background is the data of the increase in surface temperature through the years. According to IPCC, or United Nations, through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report, global warming is very progressive and that the surface temperature would decrease between 1 degree Celsius and 3.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Such drastic increase might eventually lead to extinction not only of the kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia, but as well as the human existence. We cannot just use technology for a backup plan or to resist these changes. Right now, we must be creating projects and programs to lessen the global warming before its major result of destruction. By we, I mean not only those in government positions, but also everyone should be participating in controlling the climate change. As defined by the United Nations, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, but since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, which produces heat-trapping gases. Presented in the screen right now is the distribution of different emissions of carbon dioxide from year 1990 to 2015. As technology progresses, the release of such deadly chemicals gradually increase. The emission of carbon dioxide as well as the release of methane, nitrous oxide, HFCs or the hydrofluorocarbons, these are commonly used in supermarket refrigerators, PFCs or the perfluorochemicals, which are a group of chemicals used to make fluoropolymer coatings and products that resist heat, oil, stains, grease, and water, and SF6 or the sulfur hexafluoride gas commonly used as an insulating and arc-quenching gas in medium and high voltage circuit breakers and electrical switchgear. The next slide shows us the top CO2 emitting countries from 1750 to year 2020 from fossil fuels and cement. The United States leading the chart for 24.5%, equating to more than 400,000 megatons of carbon dioxide. If there is an effect, we might as well want to identify the major contributors in the change in climate. Not only natural processes affect the climate, but we could say that the global warming's increase is caused by really a lot of human activities.
According to Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration, or popularly known as PAG-ASA, the climate change cannot be simply explained by natural variation or natural causes. In the mid-20th century, it is confirmed that climate system may change due to human activities. Similarly to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, in 2007, they also stated that human activities are the major contributors to the occurrence of climate change. Human activities are we specifically referring to? Majority of this is the fossil fuel burning. Fossil fuel burnings produces green gases and aerosols that can affect the changes of the climate by simply altering the incoming solar radiation and intercepting the sun's outgoing infrared thermal radiation. And it can lead to cooling or warming of the climate system. That is why we often experience sudden changes of heat. When we say greenhouse gases, we are referring to the four major greenhouse gases, which are the methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and the halocarbon. Methane is a gas found in small quantities in the atmosphere. Example of methane are oil and flammable fuels, and it can be produced in human activities such as agriculture, natural gas distribution, and from landfills. This is the nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is an odorless, colorless, and flammable gas, and it can causes dizziness, unconsciousness, or even death when inhaled. It can be produced by fertilization and burning fossil fuels. Next, we have the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a colorless and non-flammable gas. We all know that carbon dioxide is an important gas used for living. But when we mix it with toxin, it will become harmful in our body. We can acquire these harmful gases through activities like transportation, building, heating and cooling, and manufacturing of goods. And lastly, we have the halocarbon. Halocarbon are gases that can contribute to climate change, and they are also largely responsible for the stratospheric ozone loss over the recent decades because of their dual impact. They are particularly concerned to environmental health. So, as you can observe here in our chart, the concentration of greenhouse gases is increasing from 0 to 2005. So, as greenhouse gases emission from human activities increase, they build up in the atmosphere and warm the climate because it can traps the heat around the surface of the earth, leading to many other changes around the world. So, for the following causes of climate change, let us hear it from the following reporter.
Good day everyone, I am Jean Cabrera. So for today we will talking about the natural causes. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Earth System of the United States enumerated the following as a national causes of climate change, which are volcanic eruption, ocean currents, solar variation, internal variability, and Earth orbital changes. Let us now talk about the first one, which is the volcanic eruption. First, we will define what is volcanic eruption. So, volcanic eruption is when lava and gas are released from volcano. Sometimes it is explosively. The most dangerous type of eruption is called a glowing avalanche, which is when freshly erupted magma flows down the side of a volcano. The effect of volcanoes have on the climate is short-term cooling. In the Philippines, way back in June 1991, the Mount Pinatubo erupted as an estimated 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide and ash particles blasted over 12 miles into Earth's atmosphere. The blast was powerful that the ejected material entered the Earth's lowest stratosphere. Here, the ash particles spread out to form a tin of debris. The cloud reflected some of the sun's radiation back into the space. This resulted in less solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface, which is caused a small drop in the Earth's temperature. Meanwhile, back in the stratosphere, the ejected sulfur dioxide was converted into tiny particles called sulfate aerosols. The sulfate aerosols reflected solar radiation back into space that turned into cooling effect on the Earth's temperature. But they also had another characteristic wherein they observed some of the infrared radiation emitted by the Earth. Usually, the greenhouse effect causes infrared radiation escaping from the Earth to be trapped and reflected back to the Earth. This results in an increase in temperatures on the Earth's surface. But sulfate aerosol has absorbed some of the escaping infrared radiation, to stopping it being reflected back to Earth. The result is decrease in temperature on Earth's surface. So, the volcanic eruption can affect climate change by blocking out solar radiation and absorbing infrared radiation emitted by the Earth. It took over 2 years for the ash and sulfide particles dispersed for the stratosphere completely. So that's the end of my part. The next one will be discussed more further by the next report.
Hello everyone, I'm Shaira Tayag and I will discuss ocean currents, which is under the natural causes of climate change. Ocean currents are driven by a range of sources: the wind, tides, changes in water density, and the rotation of the earth. The topography of the ocean floor and the shoreline modifies those motions, causing currents to speed up, slow down, or change direction. Ocean currents fall into two main categories: surface currents and deep ocean currents. Surface currents control the motion of the top 10% of the ocean's water, while deep ocean currents mobilize the other 90%, though they have different causes. Surface and deep ocean currents influence each other in an intricate dance that keeps the entire ocean moving. Near the shore, surface currents are both driven by winds and tides, which draw water back and forth as the water level falls and rises. Meanwhile, in the open ocean, wind is the major force behind surface currents. As wind blows over the ocean, it drags the top layer of water along with it. In fact, water as deep as 400 meters is still affected by the wind at the ocean surface. If you zoom out to look at the patterns of surface currents all over the Earth, you'll see that they form big loops called gyres, which travels clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. That's because of the way the Earth's rotation affects the wind patterns that give rise to these currents. If the Earth didn't rotate, air and water would simply move back and forth between low pressure at the equator and high pressure at the poles. But as the Earth spins, air moving from the equator to the North Pole is deflected eastward, and air moving back down is deflected westward. The mirror image happens in the southern hemisphere, so that the major streams of wind form loop-like patterns around the ocean basins. This is called Coriolis effect. The wind pushes the ocean beneath them into the same rotating gyres. And because water holds onto heat more effective than air, these currents help redistribute warmth around the globe. Unlike surface currents, deep ocean currents are driven primarily by changes in the density of water. As water moves towards the North Pole, it gets colder. It also has a higher concentration of salt because the ice crystal that form trap water while leaving salt behind. This called salty water is more dense, so it sinks, and warmer surface water takes its place, setting up a vertical current called thermohaline circulation. Thermohaline circulation of deep water and wind-driven surface currents combine to form a winding loop called the global conveyor belt. The global conveyor belt is the longest current in the world, snaking all around the globe, but it only moves a few centimeters per second. It could take a drop of water 1,000 years to make the full trip. The global conveyor belt includes both surface and deep ocean currents that circulates the globe in 1,000-year cycle. This circulation is the result of two simultaneous processes: warm surface currents carrying less dense water away from the equator toward the poles, and cold deep ocean currents carrying denser water away from the poles toward the equator. The ocean's global circulation system plays a key role in distributing heat energy, regulating weather and climate, and cycling vital nutrients and gases. And that's it for my part, guys. Thank you very much for listening and hope you learned something. God bless.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jana Marie Antonio, and today I'm going to discuss solar variations. So first, let me give you the meaning of solar variation or solar variability. Solar variability refers to the changes in the levels of solar radiation, as well as in the number and size of sunspots, with 11-year cyclic variation. So it is likely to affect climate on timescales of minutes to millions of years. It is often believed that only slow variations can affect the climate. The energy for the Earth's climate system comes from the sun, although the sun's energy output seems constant from a daily perspective. Slight variations over a long time might result in climatic shifts. A portion of the warming in the first half of the 20th century, according to some scientists, was brought about by a rise in solar energy generation. Being that the sun is the primary, it will be reasonable to use a source of energy that is important to our climate system, assuming that variations in the sun's energy output would lead to change. Studies in the scientific community show that solar changes played a part of climate changes in the past. For instance, it was once believed that a drop in solar activity have caused the Little Ice Age, which lasted roughly from 1650 to 1850. From 1410 through the 1720s, ice largely blocked off Greenland and glaciers retreated around the Alps. According to Thomas Woods, the fluctuations in the solar cycle impacts Earth's global temperature by about 0.1 degrees Celsius, slightly hotter during solar maximum and cooler during solar minimum. However, the current global warming not be accounted for by fluctuations in the sun. Since 1750, the typical quantity of either energy derived by the sun stayed the same or slightly increased. If a more anthropogenic form of scientists would anticipate seeing an active sun temperature increase throughout all layers of the atmosphere. Their only observation is a warming at the surface and in the lower regions of the atmosphere, a cooling in the upper atmosphere and atmosphere. Because greenhouse gases absorb heat from the lower atmosphere, this occurs. Additionally, climate models that take into account fluctuations in solar irradiance cannot replicate long-term measured temperature trend of the century without accounting for an increase in greenhouse gases. I think the best way to prevent climate change is by generating electricity from solar panels, produce no greenhouse gases whatsoever, and so can help to reduce the effect of climate change if used widely. With solar energy powering a home or business, there is no burning of fuel and no emissions from energy production. That ends my report po.
Internal variability, according to Dresser and Kai et al. 2015, it refers to as the natural variability of the climate system that occurs in the absence of evolving external forcing and includes processes intrinsic to the atmosphere, ocean, land, cryosphere, and their interactions. It is at force and does not cause long-term temperature trends and variations over time in one or more measures of climate resulting from natural causes. These changes are instead caused by interactions within the climate system itself, often involving positive feedbacks. Positive feedbacks describes any processes that intensifies an initial effect, generally a push that eventually increases the magnitude of initial disturbance. This causes some initial change to grow larger and moves the system out of its original equilibrium state. One example of internal variability is El Niño and the La Niña cycle, but let me discuss their definition first. El Niño, the warm phase, means little boy or Christ child in Spanish. During El Niño, trade winds weaken, warm water is pushed back east toward the west coast of the America. El Niño can affect our weather significantly. As shown in the picture, El Niño causes the Pacific jet stream to move south and spread further east. During winter, this leads to wetter conditions than usual in southern US and warmer and drier conditions in the north. On the other hand,
La Nina means little girl in Spanish. It is also sometimes called El Viejo, anti-El Nino, or simply a cold event that has opposite effect of El Nino. During this event, trade winds are even stronger than usual, pushing more warm water toward Asia. When upwelling increases, it brings cold, nutrient-rich water to the surface. This can also lead to a more severe hurricane season. As shown in the picture, during La Nina winters, the south sees warmer and drier conditions than usual. The north and Canada tend to be wetter and colder. El Nino and La Nina affect atmospheric circulation pattern and influence global climate. Warmer and colder than average ocean temperature in one part of the world can influence weather around the globe. Both phenomena are two opposing climate patterns that break these normal conditions. Scientists call these phenomena the El Niño Southern Oscillation or the ENSO cycle. The said event can both have global impacts on weather, wildfires, ecosystems, and economies. Episodes of these phenomena typically repeats itself on a timescale of about 5 years, but these changes are short-term, only lasting a few years, but they don't occur on a regular schedule. Generally, El Niño occurs more frequently than La Niña. While El Niño increases global temperature, La Niña decreases it. Another example of internal variability is Arctic Oscillation or the AO. It is one of the main modes of variability of the Northern Hemisphere winter, also referred as Northern Annular Modes or the NAM, which associated with changing circulation pattern of air pressure in the Northern Hemisphere. Thus, AO can have a strong influence on weather and climate in major population centers in North America, Europe, and Asia, especially during winter. It is a back and forth shifting of atmospheric pressure between the Arctic and the mid-latitude of the North Pacific and the North Atlantic. This AO favors a cooler Arctic than usual and warm conditions across North America and Europe. And the other phase brings opposite weathers. It makes warmer than usual Arctic and colder weather in the subpolar regions. Nevertheless, because of this seesaw effect, the AO has little effect on global temperatures, but can significantly influence local and regional weather.
Thank you, Ms. Abigail Arce, for that wonderful presentation. Once again, I'm Janice Manarang and I will be discussing the Earth's orbital changes. Now, you may be wondering why the Earth's orbital changes can cause climate change. As we all know, climate change is caused by various human and natural factors such as deforestation, greenhouse gases, burning of fossil fuels, to mention a few. Changes in the Earth's orbit around the Sun, as well as the changes in its tilt and wobble of the Earth's axis, can cause the Earth's climate to cool or warm. This is because they alter the amount of energy our planet gets from the Sun. The three shifts in the Earth's orbit around the Sun are eccentricity, axial tilt, and precession, also referred to as the Milankovitch cycles. The Milankovitch cycles, or the Milankovitch theory, is proposed by Serbian astrophysicist Milutin Milankovitch. The Milankovitch cycles include eccentricity. This refers to the shape of the Earth's orbit, obliquity, the angle at which the Earth's axis is tilted, and lastly, precession, the movement of the Earth's axis of rotation. You can see in the screen, this is the change in eccentricity or orbital shape. The orbit of the Earth around the Sun is an ellipse, but it is not always the same shape. The shape of the orbit shifts from a circular to a more elliptical one on a 100,000-year cycle. This is brought on by the gravitational pull of the other planets on our solar system. Our climate warms as the Earth gets closer to the Sun. This also influences the length of the seasons. On the screen are the changes in obliquity and axial precession. Obliquity refers to the tilt of the Earth's axis. Over the course of 41,000 years, this angle shifts from 22.1 degrees to to 24.5 degrees and back again. Greater tilt indicates warmer summers and cooler winters. Less tilt indicates cooler summers and milder winters. Changes in the tilt of the Earth can cause slight but significant climatic changes in the strength of the seasons. Axial precession. Precession, also known as the wobble of the Earth's axis, impacts the Earth's orbit where the northern and southern hemisphere experience summer and winter. Precession occurs on a roughly 26,000-year cycle. According to Milankovitch's theory, these three cycles interact to influence the amount of solar heat that reaches the Earth's surface, which in turn influences climatic patterns including glacial periods, or commonly referred to as ice ages. The time span between these changes can be tens of thousands of years. About 12,000 years ago, the last ice age came to an end. The new cooling cycle could begin in 30,000 years. However, orbital shifts occur so gradually that they take thousands of years to become apparent. These changes are slow and steady, but even the slightest change can make a big impact on our planet. Though the Earth's orbital changes can cause climate change, it is not to blame for the rapid warming of the Earth over the last century. Once again, I'm Janice Manarang, and thank you for listening. May I now call on Ms. Angeline Bartolome for the next part of the presentation.
Potential economic impacts. One of the largest risks to economic stability is climate change, which is already having an influence on the health, economic, biological, well-being, and livelihoods of communities across the globe. Heat waves impair our ability to work and lower output. Millions of people are left in abject poverty after being cruelly swept away by hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons. These impacts are expected to grow even under the most ambitious greenhouse gas reductions targets. That is why global warming is the planet's response to the higher levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. These gases create a kind of blanket that traps the heat from the sun and sends it back to the planet's surface. Burning fossil fuels produces greenhouse gases that contribute to the current dilemma by thickening the blanket of the heat that has been created by nature. Climate change presents a range of risks and impacts that are expected to negatively impact our economy. These include property loss and damage, infrastructure and service costs, and risk to financial stability. Climate change also will likely affect farming communities, tourism and recreation, and the insurance industry, according to the US GCRP 2014. These are the key points on the potential of economic impacts. First is the climate is crucial to the way of life of communities that grew established among the cultivation of various agricultural crops such as corn, wheat, or cotton. The ideal climate for these crops will probably move north due to the climate change. Therefore, the economy affects agriculture. As a result, if there's a climate change, it will significantly impact agricultural productions since the climate is one of the important components in growing and harvesting foods that are essential to people's life. Second is tourist and leisure activities will undoubtedly impact by climate change. The number of days that can be used for outdoor recreation like swimming, skiing, hiking, and other sports will probably decline as the temperature warms and perception pattern change. The activities and recreation that people often engage in are among the things that are impacted by weather changes, the spread of diseases, and the shortage of days to engage in the aforementioned activities. Lastly, climate change may make it harder and more expensive for many people to insure their homes, businesses, or other valuable assets in risk-prone areas or pre-conclude them for insurance altogether. People who insure their houses, properties, and businesses close to the area that is at danger are also impacted by climate change, since they will have to pay for both the cost of the change and the expenses that come with it. Our lifestyles have a profound impact on our planet. Our decisions have consequences. Private houses that are responsible for about 2/3 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, a person's carbon footprint, or the quality of greenhouse gas emissions connected with their activities is influenced by the usage of power, food, transportation, and consumer goods. Significant climate change has already occurred as a result of human activity, and additional change is still being initiated. However, if we are immediately cease producing greenhouse gases, the increase in global temperature would start to level out within a few years. That is why if we want to reduce climate change, we should start to ourselves first. That's it for the discussion of potential economic impacts, and to further enlighten about this topic, next is potential biological impacts.
Good day to all of you, and today I will discuss about the potential biological impacts of climate change. My discussion will cover such as arthropods and insects, vectors, which are part of our biodiversity. So I hope you can learn something from me and my discussion. Vector-borne diseases are transmitted typically by the bite of an infected arthropod. The arthropod could be something rather familiar like a mosquito, tick, or a black fly. Or it might be a less familiar species like an African chichi fly or cokepot. These arthropods that carry and transmit diseases are known as vectors. Other non-arthropod vectors can include rodent rats, certain bats, a species of aquatic snail, and several species of wild birds. Different vectors carry different diseases such as malaria, dengue, encephalitis, African sleeping sickness, and yellow fever. Anopheles minimus mosquito, a malaria vector that carries drug-resistant malaria parasite, falciparum, feeding on a human host. The blood that this mosquito ingested is visible through its abdomen. So this is an example of an arthropod or a vector. In general, climate plays an important role in the seasonal pattern or temporal distribution of diseases that are carried and transmitted through vectors, because vector animals often thrive in particular climate conditions. For example, warm and wet environments are excellent places for mosquitoes to breed. If those breeding mosquitoes happen to be a species that can transmit disease, and if there is an infected population in that region, then the disease is more likely to spread in that area. Because the vectors are sensitive to climate, their distribution and numbers are already being altered by climate change. For example, there is an evidence that the geographic range of ticks and mosquitoes that carry disease has expanded as warmer temperatures poleward. Ticks have extended their range north in Sweden and Canada and into higher altitudes in Czech Republic. While future climate change is expected to continue to alter the distribution of disease vectors, it is important to recognize that there are several diseases or other factors such as changes in land use, population density, and human behavior that can also change the distribution of disease vectors as well as extent of infection. Examples of two diseases transmitted via vectors are malaria and dengue. That's all. Thank you so much. I'm Christine Nicole Solano reporting about the biological changes caused by climate change. Thank you.